Today on We Need to Talk, we finish our chat about languages, how to learn them, how they work, why they're weird, and also, just connecting person to person, people as unified entities within themselves. Because that's word salad right there for you, and we need to talk.
Another really cool thing that I noticed with Norwegian specifically that made me start thinking about, like, is this applicable in English too? Are there examples in English too? Is like the name Marie versus Maria. And they specifically, for whatever reason, in Duolingo have this, and I think it's because they do a good job of slowly introducing sounds to you so that you can learn like how sounds are while also learning words. Like, they're specific about what words they're teaching when. It's heter du Marie, Maria o Maria. And whether it's IE or IA is where they're putting the enunciation specifically, like where they're putting the, what's the word I'm looking for there?
Enunciation, the stress.
Yeah, where they're putting the stress on that word specifically. Is it on the I or on the A? So it's Maria or Maria. And I was like, those are the same. The first 10 times I heard it, I'm like, they're saying the same word. How is somebody going to know if you're saying, is your name Marie or Maria, if they're the same thing? And then eventually I started hearing, I'm like, actually, where they're putting that stress is in a different spot. That's super interesting. Do we have that in English?
Oh, we do. So one good example is, thankfully I thought of it, is so we have he is the suspect. So suspect. So it stresses on the suspect. But then you can say, I suspect them. I suspect them.
And that's denoting whether it's a verb or a noun?
Yeah. Well, because, so for instance, if you said, he is the suspect, he's the suspect, that sounds really weird, right? Because the version of the word you're actually pronouncing is different. So here it's kind of logistically, there's a difference between the verb version and the noun version. Because for whatever reason, it happens that the verb and the noun are actually the same word, which is kind of strange. But it's the same word, so it gets kind of confusing. So what people ended up doing was they had one version where the sus is enunciated and the other version with the spect is enunciated. And then when we actually say it, that's how you know which version is being used. It makes it more clear to your ear. That's not something that most people really even realize until it's pointed out. But if you're reading it, there actually is no enunciation there. So, but you can get it from context. And, you could figure it out if I said, I really suspect him. You could understand what I was saying, but it's going to sound kind of weird to you.
Well,
right?
What's interesting is that I can think of an example where that doesn't even work either. Where the verb is pronounced the same way as the noun, like you're saying. And that's, he's acting suspect. You would say it as if you would think he is a suspect. You would say, but that is still the verb version, which is super confusing. No wonder English is the most hardest language to learn because it's so weird. And the rules they change literally all the time.
Right. But a lot of times, like those different enunciations, like it's not something we pick up on because we have it internalized. We don't think about it really. We have those like grammar and the semantics and all these things. They're like in us, right? We don't have to really think about it. Whereas, you're somewhere else, you're gonna have to really think about, is it suspect or is it suspect, right? You have to learn what that enunciation is, and that's not gonna be very obvious. In Spanish, actually, there's actually a good example of it's a very highly stressed language or enunciated language. Because, for instance, you have hablo, which is hablo, I speak. And then you have hablo, which is I spoke. Or is that they spoke? I forget which one. But it's the same spelling, except the O with the hablo has like a little tilde on top of it to kind of denote the stress. But they're two different meanings entirely. And if you say one instead of the other, people are going to be kind of confused.
Or
like they're going to be
años versus anos.
Oh yeah, años, which is years, or anos, which is anus.
And since you say, you know, I have this many years, it's very easy to accidentally say I have 7 anuses.
Yo tengo 7 añoses. Anoses. Not. Yeah, and actually, anos, if you say it like more proper, it actually does sound like an anus. Anos. Anos. Anos.
So
But people don't make that connection there.
that reminds me of something else that like we all imperatively know as native English speakers, but don't realize we know like intuitively, and it like feels right. And that's the order of adjectives. That is always super, super interesting to me. The first time I read something about it and I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're giving me a look like you want me to explain.
Yes, please.
So order of adjectives, like if you have a list of adjectives you want to give a noun, it goes in a very specific order. It goes quantity, quality, size, age, shape, color, proper adjective like a nationality or a place of origin, and then purpose or qualifier. So you would say, you know, 10 big 10-year-olds square red kites versus 10-year-old square small blue kites. Like the order of the adjectives, that was an awful example. I should have written it, but and then read it. It would have made it sounds better quick, but it's just very interesting that like that is. Oh wait, it has an example. Hold on, I'll read their example. The house is wait. The size comes before color. Green great dragons can exist. Great green dragon makes sense, but green great dragon doesn't, unless great dragon was like a proper noun.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because that's the way I even perceived that. Like, great dragon, like, the great dragons came and they destroyed the Middle Earth.
But if it's like, you know, the best green dragon versus green the best dragon, that just doesn't sound right.
That's something where I didn't realize that was a thing, but now that you pointed out, it totally is.
And I butchered it.
There is a very specific order for it.
I butchered it very bad, but try it in your real life. Like the next time you're using 2 or 3 adjectives to explain something, try mixing them up and just see how ridiculous it sounds.
It's kind of a logic to it as well, because like the adjectives modify to modify verbs or divide verbs. Well, anyway, there's like different adverbs modify verbs, adjectives modify nouns. So there's a particular way of arranging them so that they modify the correct thing. Like like a slowly moving green dog, right? So slowly modifies moving because it's slowly moving, and then green modifies the dog. So there's a kind of a logic to it, but it's not necessary that there's a logic to it, but it's not necessary that exact grammar structure is necessary or needed. It's not like you could arrange in different ways. For instance, in Spanish, you say like un perro. Sorry, let's do un perro amarillo, which is yellow dog, right? The adverb, no, the adjective comes after the noun, which I think makes more sense for me, because whenever I read shit, I get really confused, because like you start going on with these adjectives and I don't know what I'm supposed to be like imagining. Like, okay, it's yellow and big and it's great or whatever, and just try to imagine these abstract concepts, and then like dog, and like, okay, now I'm gonna apply these things over here. Whereas if I can picture the noun first and then apply those things to it, it makes more sense for me. But there's not like a right or wrong way to do it. It just matters that you're consistent with the way you do it. That way, whoever's reading, interpreting it can put those things together into the correct package or output it.
You know, what's super interesting is that I think it depends on the context too. If you're reading and trying to imagine a thing, I agree with you, noun and then modify the noun in that order. But if you are trying to point something out in the real world, I think it's easier to start with the adjectives and then get to the thing, especially if the adjectives perverse the thing to the point where the thing doesn't look like the thing anymore. So if you're pointing out in the sky at a big yellow kite, you're looking for something big and then something yellow and then looking for a kite, versus if you say kite, yellow, big, or big yellow, like it may not look like a kite at first because maybe it's shaped weird or something, you know? So in that way, I think in real life, adjectives first make sense, and in written word and imagination, noun first makes sense.
That's really interesting, because that actually sounds very, very likely. Like almost like the English version of it came about from more of a verbal, say, construction of it, whereas maybe the Spanish version, perhaps there's another reason for it, but the Spanish version may have been more influenced by writing of Spanish itself, which could be very possible because the Spanish language is kind of interesting and it's very phonetic. Like if you can read Spanish, you can pronounce everything, because everything in Spanish is phonetic. Like it sounds the way it's spelt, which is not like most languages. But yeah, that is intriguing, because I've always thought that the way English did it was weird, but now that you say that, I think it's maybe not weird. It's just weird in writing.
Which is super interesting because, like, Spanish is a romantic language, so it came from some of the earliest languages, and English is not. So their actual, like, core bases of where they come from originally, what they're built on, are completely different. And maybe that is one of the reasons there that that they end up, like, syntax is in a completely different way, you know?
Right, right. And one of the things that's kind of interesting with that is different languages have different conceptions or different ways of viewing certain things. So, for instance, let's say I'm saying I'm sorry in English. It's I'm sorry, right? I am this thing, right? Whereas in Spanish, you say lo siento, which translates to I'm sorry, but it literally translates to I feel it. So it's kind of like saying the thing you feel, I feel it myself, which is kind of more empathetic than kind of stating that you are something. And that is just a much different way of kind of viewing that whole experience. And then there's another example with me duele mi cabeza. No, sorry, me duele la cabeza, which is my head hurts, right? So that's pretty simple, right? We say my head hurts in English, but in Spanish it translates to it pains me the head. So it's kind of more of, or you could say the head pains me might be a more natural translation, but the head pains me. So it's like the head is causing the effect to me, where the other side is my head hurts, where it's like possessive over like the experience. So there's two different kind of like experiences there. And I can almost feel like the language would almost, like the experience a person was having translated itself into the language.
Very interesting. I know in Norwegian it's unnskyld is I'm sorry, but even then, like if you Google I'm sorry, like sorry in Norwegian, there's like 10 or 15 different ways that you can say that exact thing, including a bunch of different words that don't even use unnskyld. Like beklaga is also technically that. So jeg beklager samai is I sincerely apologize. And I apologize to any Norwegians that I am butchering your language, but I'm learning, and I'm gonna be there with you guys, able to talk in the future. But it's just super interesting because there are different ways you can say sorry, like it's my fault, or I didn't mean that, or I'll make sure not to make this mistake again. But then there are even just like the word sorry, it can be written in different ways.
I think my favorite way of saying I'm sorry is I'm sorry you feel that way.
That's not saying I'm sorry. That's near the opposite.
When people say that and they think it's like, I said I'm sorry, it's like, no, you did not. You did not. You're blaming this all on my emotionality, which is probably true, but still. Liar.
So, I mean, learning a language is a lot of fun, I've found. And I get really excited when I'm practicing it, and I'm like killing it. I'm not making any mistakes, and I'm like usually. So the way Duolingo has it is they'll have a phrase, like let's say they have a phrase in Norwegian, and then down below they'll have a bunch of Norwegian words, and you just pick the ones to put them in the right order. So I'll try and read that phrase without looking at the words below to try and like, can I do this without those aids of being able to see like, okay, well, it's one of these words definitely, and then pick out the one I think it is, so that I'm kind of challenging myself to be like, do I actually know this, or am I just like matching words together? Because those are very different, and it's really exciting when I feel like I actually know what's going on.
One aspect to learning a language, I think, is to internalize the language as well, which takes a while to do. But the goal of learning, like what I was learning Spanish, with all the materials kind of like researching into, big claim there, which I agree with, is that the point of learning Spanish is not to have like, not to know that perro is dog, gato is cat. It's to really just have that internal understanding that when you see gato, that you think of the cat, but you don't think cat in English. Like the English is kind of disconnected, and you kind of understand the language on its own, and you can kind of think in that language. Which, like, I didn't get like, I would say I got like maybe intermediate level. Like I could have basic conversations and do all right with Spanish. I suck at it now, but I started to kind of like get an intuition and kind of like an internal kind of thinking in Spanish. Like I could actually think a bit in Spanish and kind of like place thoughts. And every once in a while, like I would have, like I'd try to think of how to say something, and then I would come up with a way to say it. Like I don't know, I'm trying to come up with a good example, but que calor. Bad example because that's just like how hot. But there's certain like little weird verbiage things that don't quite make sense in English. Like if you take the literal translation, it makes no sense. Like you're like, why are you putting the K right there? The K doesn't belong in the middle of the sentence. But in English or in Spanish, it actually does make sense with the kind of internal understanding. So once you kind of start thinking in the language itself is kind of when you can start like really kind of progressing forward through the study and kind of like having a real understanding of the language. And that's just my experience with Spanish. Norwegian, I think, might be a little bit tough because I think it is like a Germanic language. Is that right?
I'm not sure. I know that honestly, there's a lot of very close similarities to English. Especially with their pronunciation, like here is spelled HER, and there is spelled DER, but they pronounce it der. So like a lot of times you can just hear what sounds like them speaking English, but it's all in Norwegian. So I found it actually really intuitive and fun to learn, and not super difficult. I found Spanish way more difficult, but maybe that was just the way I was learning Spanish at the time.
Yeah. Well, also, you maybe didn't have like a real motivation or drive to do it, which can affect, the state of learning, because in school, we're just kind of made to learn it. And I wanted to learn Spanish for myself, so I loved it. But, guys, I was actually studying Spanish books outside of class. That's how much I like Spanish. But if you're not like on board with it and just kind of studying it and just trying to get the grade, it's going to be hard to really get invested into it. But, I think that there actually might be a different aspect to it for you as well. It kind of sounds like. It sounds like you're just intrigued with the language.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. And, I did like learning Spanish. I didn't, I know you and I used to do it some outside of school. We just, use Spanish phrases all the time. But definitely not to your level where I was studying outside of school, versus now. I really wish I had, because it would be super useful to me in my current job. So I've added Spanish to my Duolingo. I think learning two languages simultaneously might be a little too much. But I don't know that I'm ever going to get to the point where I sound like a native speaker, because I don't think that's my goal. I think my biggest goal is to be able to understand and have conversation, in Norwegian, and to be able to assist in the learning process for my girlfriend, and to be able to watch those videos too, alongside her, because those guys really are super super funny and talented.
It's kind of interesting because I've almost deciding to pick up Japanese, to be honest, just because I'm watching so many anime and like I just want to know what they're saying in Japanese.
Yeah, I mean Duolingo, I highly suggest. It's free. You can pay $80 a year for like all of the bonus stuff, but it's not 100% necessary, especially if you have a small goal. Their max goal is 20 minutes a day, and I usually double, if not triple that every single day. So it's not super hard for 15. If you set your goal to what they consider like a more challenging goal, it's their third out of four. There's 5, 10, 15, and 20 minute increments per day as far as your goals. Even 15 minutes per day, you could learn a language in the course of, like, let's say in a year, you could be speaking that language pretty decently. Since I'm able to say simple things. Hi, good dog. So like I practiced that one a whole bunch because it's hi and good day, which is super basic, but super useful. So I think it's really a good tool, and I'm sure there's tons of other ones as well if there's other ways that you learn. I just think that I highly suggest, there's no reason not to, if you can set aside 15 minutes a day, do it while you're taking a shit. Like, it's really that easy.
Yeah, so some recommendations I would have, because I went balls deep into this for a while, is consistency is the most important thing to do. So if you're consistent with it, that's number one. Number two, kind of work on pronunciation and also the reading side. And, you can even like say watch like certain shows. Like I used to watch like a bit of Pokemon in Spanish because that was kind of fun, a little bit nostalgic. You can find songs that are translated into the other language. So just find things that you like and kind of like start trying to understand it, and try to understand it from the perspective of the language. You do have to build a bit of a, not a fortress, a little bit of a scaffolding to kind of get that there initially. So, just learning high and stuff, you have to build that little base. But then once you start getting the base, then try to understand the language in its own terms. And then beyond that, use some sort of program. So there's a lot of programs that have this like memorized. I think Duolingo also does some spaced repetition type stuff, but use a spaced repetition sort of scheme. Memrise definitely uses it. I'm pretty sure Duolingo does, but essentially what it does is it tests you on certain vocab or certain words or phrases, and it will give you, it makes sure you're good on it. So it may ask you a couple times, over the course of like a couple days. And eventually, once you get it, then they'll ask you maybe like a week later. And then, if you get it right, then maybe like 2 weeks later, and then maybe 3 weeks. And it kind of pushes that out further and further. And that's a good way to not just like get the vocabulary once, but also keeps that vocab in mind, because you're having to recall it, especially when it's on like just leaving memory is the best way to maintain that memory, is to kind of like get it solidified. And the only other recommendation I would have is to, and this is mostly just the listeners, is to learn phrases, like put more emphasis on phrases and kind of sentences as a whole, as opposed to individual words. Because like with a phrase, you can take that phrase and you can kind of abstract different grammatical concepts from it, and also abstract the words. So you might have like el perro cambia en, I don't know, en la moon. I can't think Spanish right now, but you can have like a sentence where like the dog walks across the moon, right? So that's a sentence right there. And if you can memorize that, I mean, not memorize, but kind of familiarize with yourself with that sentence, you have, number one, a vocab word, you have the grammar in there, and you have the structure of the sentence. And you can take that structure and apply it to other things. So other phrases, other things, it's insert the different nouns and kind of like, piece it together. So I think that is often more important than learning, like, say, high-level grammar concepts or learning individual words. It's more learning like phrases, because we don't speak in words, we speak in phrases. I mean, words make up phrases, but the phrases are what actually is communicating the overall idea. So those are just my couple pieces of advice, which I probably start applying to myself if I start learning Japanese, it's gonna be a lot of time if I start doing that. Like with your goal of learning our Norwegian, my goals for Japanese would not be to speak Japanese fluently because that's gonna be really, really tough. But it'd be more just to be able to like watch certain shows with subtitles on, like English subtitles. But I'd only want to have to look at the English subtitles when I was like not understanding Japanese. That'd be my goal.
And I think those are all really, really good advice. I think my only experience is Duolingo, so I know that they do the spatial repetition, like you're saying, and they practice phrases versus vocab. So I think that it's completely in line with a lot of the things you're suggesting. I think some of those suggestions might even be more than what people need because. Like if you're super serious about learning and like you want to speed up the process, definitely follow all of those things. But I think, everybody should try and learn, at least one other language if they can. And there's, it's really easy. It's free. And literally you could just spend a couple minutes a day. You could even just spend 5 minutes a day and learn a little bit very, very slowly. And over time, it's that daily repetition, like you're saying. But you don't need to necessarily have some crazy goal or push yourself super hard or go out of your way to look for stuff. It can really be as simple as just like practice for 5 minutes a day and you'll suddenly be learning something that can be really, really valuable.
Definitely agree. Yeah, you know what? Scratch Japanese. I don't want to learn Japanese anymore. I think I just realized the language I want to learn.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Czechoslovakian.
Hey, why is that, Nate?
Well, there's a special girl in my life. She doesn't know it yet, but Tito Angel, I'm ready to talk to you in your native tongue.
Nate, we need to talk.